get quiet. It's so great. It's like, oh, it must be time. They're paying attention. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for being here today. We get to start part 3 of the course today, which is pretty exciting because that is all about choice, right? The idea that now we have learned some things, we have some connections we've developed, or maybe not learned them, but chosen the relationships and opportunities that we have to connect with ourselves and to each other and to the natural world. That was part 1. And then we get that all of the kind of the bad news section of part 2, the challenging place, the underlying causes, root causes. And then here we are in part 3, where we can talk about actual choices that we have the opportunity to make. And understanding that these choices have, there could be small things that you choose. It could just be making things more intentional as you move through your days. So today we're going to start with the idea of food, right? Not just the idea. We're going to talk more about food. And how will we choose to respond? The idea that we have the word responsibility, the ability to respond. So one of those opportunities that's coming up for you is if you're curious about becoming a TA, we'll have signups out for you on Wednesday. I wanted to tell you just a moment about it, is that the training is worth 3 credits. The TAing itself is worth 4 credits. And then, and all of that counts toward the sustainability leadership minor. So you'll go through all of those details when you come for your TA conversation. The conversation doesn't imply that you're sure that you want to do it. It's just a conversation around what are the details of doing it, of being a TA. So conversations, signups will be on Wednesday, starting Wednesday. So we're in this place where we've talked about a lot of overwhelm, right? Or it could be possible to be feeling a lot of overwhelm. And so there's this concept in psychology of learned helplessness. Martin Selig was a researcher that did a lot of research, particularly on dogs, related to when they feel like they can't do anything about their situation. And sometimes in these moments of being so overwhelmed or perplexed by the situation that we can feel helpless, and then that idea or that feeling can carry it through, right? The idea of, well, I learned over here that I couldn't make any change really, and so I'm just not going to try. And that's one approach, except that it can be a temporary state of mind as well. Learned helplessness can be, there's an article in module 12 for you to check out about this, but it can be overcome, right? We can actually choose other ways of being in the world, right? We aren't helpless. We are able to choose. So there is going to be change ahead, all kinds of changes in the world moving forward. And how is it that we're going to respond? And I feel like even the smallest things that I can choose to be more aware, to be more connected with other people, or to be more connected to myself, or understanding where my resources come from, I like that. And so I like to continue being aware. And you get to choose how you're going to do it moving forward. So this part of the course, part 3, will have more information about those. What's out there? What's available? What are the choices? So we are going to talk specifically today about food. This will be followed by shelter on Wednesday and transportation next Monday. Those are the 3, if you remember back to figuring out your ecological footprint. Food, transportation, and shelter are our three big categories of our ecological footprint. So, how we choose our food has some really interesting consequences for us and for the world around us, and actually for the people and relationships that we want to build too. Here's a flashback for you back to class number 8. Eating is receiving nutrients. Earth, water, fire, air, and space combine to make this food. We take the lives and labor of numberless beings that we may eat. May we be nourished that we may nourish life. So I posed the question to you back then in the life and death class about what that quote means to you, Joan Halifax's quote. May we be nourished that we may nourish life. And in that place, we were talking about our actual cells, right? What we are made of and how we're made of all the same stuff as Earth. And now we're here in this place where we're thinking about choices. We're thinking about the food that nourishes us, that we may nourish life. So, what has nourishment look like for you today? How have you chosen what you put into your body? So I'm going to pose that question to you, and you can think about it, talk to your neighbor about it, and we'll hear from some of you. What does nourishment look like? I have a tickle in my throat that will not go away. I do. Is there anybody who would like to speak to this?
I just try to eat as much as possible because I'm a very hungry dude. Like I like to eat all the time. I make sure to get a lot of protein in, electrolytes, carbohydrates, fruits, vegetables. I take at least like 5 vitamins when I get up and like 9 vitamins when I go to bed to help my body rest and recover for the next day. But I just do it because I like to work out and I like to look good. So I like to eat a lot so I can feel good.
Oh, so it's a very conscious choice for you. That's cool. Thank you. So a lot of thought and planning and energy goes into your choosing of your nourishment. Nice. Anyone else want to? There'll be more choice. Oh, there's somebody right. Yeah.
I feel like the sunlight when I like step outside in the morning, that's always a way that I feel like I'm like nourishing myself, even if I have nothing inside of me, even if I haven't drank water yet, the sun is like my full nourishment. It always makes me feel so good.
I feel that. I can relate to that too. And vitamin D is actually, that's what builds our healthy bones and keeps us moving. It's important for our mood. Sunshine is absolutely nourishment for us. Yes.
Yeah, I wake up, I put oatmeal in the microwave with protein powder, milk, frozen blueberries, honey. I'm very careful about what I put in my body to fuel it. I look at food as like a fuel source. So I feel much more productive when I eat healthy foods. Like my lunch, I then go with like 6 eggs, avocados, salsa, sometimes cheese if I'm feeling a little like spicy, like a little special, you know? So um,
Was today a cheese day?
today was a cheese day,
Today was
100%. I was looking at like pepper jack, Monterey Jack,
Yeah.
just
Score.
so anyway.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent.
Yeah.
So nourishment looks like so many different things for different people, and it looks different on different days, depending on schedules, depending on where you are, whether you're with your family, whether you're alone, whether how all of these different things that play in. I want to just show you or share with you my grandpa, one of my favorite people in the world. Um, also lived to be 99, one of the healthiest people I've ever known, insisted on coffee and cookies twice a day. And so I was raised on this very healthy moment of rest of coffee and cookies and what that does. So today I brought that. So around 10 and around 2, I have even just an ode to my grandpa, even if I'm not eating the cookies. But today I have maple bars. They're pretty great. One of my favorite cookies. And so when I think about my maple bars, it's not just about this routine for me. It's not just about honoring my grandfather, but it's about what's in this, right? So for me, it's gluten-free flour, so it's rice flour. I'm also dairy intolerant, so there's no butter. It's a plant butter that's in there. And then there's maple syrup. In this case, it's Pennsylvania maple syrup. It also has some sugar, so that sugar cane coming from someplace tropical where it's been processed and developed, right? There's baking soda that comes out of a mine somewhere in Colorado. Who knew about that? Um, it also has, let me think about eggs. I can't eat eggs either, and so it would have local eggs, but instead mine has flaxseed meal. And so when I start breaking down all of the things that are in my food, right, it's really interesting to consider all of the ingredients, but then all of the places in the world, like these have vanilla in them, which doesn't grow locally. I can buy imitation vanilla, or I can get vanilla that's grown someplace very tropical. So that has to get to me. So then thinking about all the people that are in my tradition, right? All of the miners that did the baking soda and the salt, that's interesting. And then I have the people that ground up the rice to make the flour. So the miles, the people, the energy that goes into my simple tradition of my coffee and my cookies today. I have Standing Stone Honduras coffee grown by a man named Emilio somewhere in Honduras. He's a friend of my brother's, and my brother owns the coffee shop, roasts the coffee, and then it comes to me. I add my hemp milk and my maple syrup. So, in my very simple food tradition that's been part of my family forever, it's involved thousands of people, thousands of miles. And it's so interesting to think of the story of what goes into our food. So today we're going to talk more about these stories of what goes into our food. Thinking about your favorite food, right? Where does it come from? What part of your culture? Do you have a favorite meal that's based around a religious tradition or Thanksgiving? You know, that meal is pretty well known and all of the history that's involved in that. And so food is such an essential part of our culture as individuals and then as culture as a whole. So we're going to consider some of this today as we break it down. lots of different layers of things we can talk about related to foods. We're going to start at this very simple place of taking one food and thinking about the story or the choices related to one food. So the example we're going to use today is potatoes. So potatoes, right? There you go, out of the ground. Potatoes, pretty healthy, good starch, good carbohydrates. So backyard potatoes, if you're going to grow your own potato, all you need is one old potato and cut the eye out and stick it in the ground, and it's going to start to grow. Maybe you've seen this in your kitchen where it starts to grow even without being in the ground. It just starts sprouting. This is happening in my kitchen right now. If you put them in the ground and you give them a little water every now and then, they're going to grow into potatoes under the ground, the roots, and then you dig them up. So it's not a lot of energy going in. 1 calorie of energy in, and you get a ratio of 1 calorie in to 20 calories out. So it's pretty wise, actually. If you go to store potatoes, then if you're buying your potatoes in the store as potatoes, then it's 5 calories of energy in for 1 calorie of energy out. So you've seen that our ratio has already flipped and flipped pretty dramatically when we're thinking about buying potatoes from the store as compared to growing them in the ground at your house. Then we think about French fries. I have to admit, I do like French fries, sometimes too much. 10 calories of energy in, 1 calorie of energy out. So we're increasing that flipped ratio, right? The opposite. More and more energy in. And then we have potato chips, 20 calories of energy in for every 1 calorie of food energy out. So what's changing as we go from level to level? Why does that ratio of energy in and energy out change so dramatically? Does anybody have any ideas? Yeah.
What's going into it?
Yeah.
So for packaging and everything like that, people have to make that plastic. People have to package it. You got food workers for the French fries, packing the potatoes. So each step is adding
More calories, more energy in. Exactly. So the difference is in all of the agricultural levels as well as the packaging, and then you have the transportation. So what's really changing that ratio is the input of oil, right? The input of fossil fuels going into those foods and shifting that ratio. So this is an interesting way to look at choices about how to maximize our calories for what's going in and what's coming out. So then what's the return on your investment? So if you're going to look at calories, right, then also thinking about costs. So all of the costs related, if you're going to grow homegrown potatoes, it's pretty close to $0 a pound. Doesn't get much cheaper than that. Store-bought potatoes, 40 cents a pound, and then all the way up to, in those 6-ounce cans of Pringles, that's not a pound. So then you have to make up a pound, you get 3 cans of them. So thinking about going back to our conversation about where your dollars go, right? How are you going to use that resource, your financial resources? If you don't need to burn dollars, where you don't need to burn dollars, right? So considering nourishment bang for your buck, essentially, if you're trying to save money and get food, what do you choose? So when you go into the grocery store, think about that scene as you walk into the grocery store where you typically shop. We have never before had such a diversity of products available in the grocery store. So in the late 1990s, there were about 7,000 items in the grocery store. And now there are somewhere between 40 and 50,000 items in the grocery store to choose from. What is nourishment? How do you find nourishment when you walk in the store? We've already talked about decision making, choice making. You have your list, you walk in, And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, but the Oreos, here are some Oreos. That's interesting. I came in for fruit, but then there's this choice of Oreos. So our brain's doing all this complicated decision making around things like food like substances. So whole potatoes are food, but then potato products, when you get into the instant mashed potatoes or the potato chips or all the other kinds of potatoes. So extra processing leads to less nutrition, more additives, preservatives, human-made sweeteners, like I mentioned during the chemicals class. So thinking about what is food? So a tip that really helped me, if you pay attention to shopping the edges of the grocery store. So you walk down in the store I go to, typically there's fruits and vegetables along the sides. There can be some things like cheeses in that same aisle. That's where the potatoes are then. And then you go across the back and then you get the meats. And then around the corner are the dairy products, right? So what is it? How do we shop the grocery store so that we are maximizing the opportunity for getting the best nourishment that we can? And yet, not everyone has access to all of those choices, right? In the United States, there are food deserts, places where people have no car and no supermarket store, meaning a large grocery store or box store where they can buy these things within a mile. And so this, as the darker colors increase, or as it increases in intensity of color, those are the places where people are struggling to find food, right? And this happens in cities, as you can see over in this region, like these areas here are still up in the higher percentages of struggling to get to food. Food deserts are geographic areas where residents have few to no convenient options for securing affordable and healthy foods, especially fresh fruits and vegetables. These are disproportionately found in high poverty areas, in which case food deserts create extra everyday hurdles that can make it harder for kids and families and communities to grow healthy and strong. So as we know, what we get to eat, what we have to eat when we are young influences our health for the rest of our lives. So these food deserts are really a challenge. The idea that socioeconomic status really plays a role in what's available to people. And that's true in our own community here, is that just because you're walking into a giant supermarket doesn't mean that you have financial access to all the things in that supermarket. And that's really a challenge, is that how can we get real nourishment? How can everyone get real nourishment when there is such economic disparity? And so that is a challenge. There are people here on campus that are working on this challenge. As you know, there's a food bank here, as you might know, there's a food bank here on campus where students who are struggling or challenged with the finances can go and get food there. In fact, anyone can go and get food there. And there are organizations on campus working for that. So this is a real challenge. And yet we also are faced with these realities that food takes up more space in US landfills than anything else. So there is an argument out there that there is enough food for everyone on the planet to lead a healthy and nutritious life, but that the global food supply is inequitable. So after all that energy that's put into food that's coming to us, then we must face this issue. What's happening with all this waste that's going into the landfills? Food waste generates 8% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. The production of wasted food in the US alone is equivalent to the greenhouse gas emissions of 37 million cars. So thinking about what you're eating and what you're not eating and how much waste is being produced I had a friend in college that would eat a burger. He would take so much food, and then he would, as he was eating, he wouldn't eat the very edge of the burger. And when I asked him about it, he said, well, that's because that's where my fingers touched last. And I was like, that's interesting. So your fingers touched the middle of the burger too, but you ate that part. And really what it came down to was that he had taken too much food and that was going to end up as food waste. He was going to throw it away with this story in his head of, well, I don't want to eat that because I touched it. And so there just the idea that we create these stories around things that we do, um, and how food waste can be part of those. It's nearly 40 million tons, 30 to 40% of the US food supply is discarded by Americans every year. And 1/3 of the food around the world is wasted. So it's not getting to the places that need help, that need good food. This feels a little bit ridiculous to me that there's so much waste. So this is one of those things that if you're feeling compelled around this topic, that to do some more research, become more aware, and then make choices about how to spend your time if this is something that you are driven by. This wouldn't be a very complete food class if we didn't talk about meat. When you had these conversations about your ecological footprint in your labs, I imagine that the conversation about meat came up in many of those labs. So eating meat, 41% of the US land in the 48 contiguous states is used for livestock pastures and range and animal feed production. So 41% of our land is put toward the meat that we produce in this country. So even as more Americans than ever report reducing meat consumption, we still remain the highest capita consumers of meat worldwide. And to do this, 9.5 billion animals are slaughtered in the US annually. So we're losing, when we go back to the potato ratio energy thing, we're losing about 90% of the energy that we're putting in when we are consuming meat. So what is the full story about meat? This video I'm about to show comes with a trigger warning. So if this is something that might upset you, the video lasts about 4 or 5 minutes. If you need to leave and come back, that's understandable. But if you do that, please reflect on why and how that works in your mind. So this is embedded in the slide. Thank you. Will you turn it up just a little bit? And then if you stop, yeah, stop at around 5:28. So what is meat doing? Why is it so significantly increasing our footprint, right? So all of the resource that it takes to grow, the water consumption, as well as water pollution, land, forest, and deforestation, and then the idea of climate change and how these farming practices are contributing to our greenhouse gases. It takes about 284 gallons of oil to raise one cow. So to put that all in context, the meat that one American expends annually for meat would equal driving about 16,720 miles in the meat that we consume. Store, refrigeration, home refrigeration, preparation, all of those things. So the number of animals that goes into this, 75 billion chickens. Doug referred to that during the bird class. And then you can see this is the for food worldwide. So how is this all related, right? How we just saw all of these people working to package that meat, the slaughterhouse workers, physical injuries are only the beginning. So in the average cattle slaughterhouse, the employee tasked with firing the bolt gun that kills or incapacitates each cow sees about 2,500 cows per day. So one person is killing 2,500 animals a day, one cow kill every 12 seconds. Violent and physically demanding work, high rates of serious injuries in slaughterhouses, high pressure, repetitive, and strenuous work, both physical and mental. So there are all these pieces, as well as that psychological toll, the need to dissociate themselves from the tasks so that they don't feel guilty about what they're doing. And then there's higher aggression and anxiety and hostility and PTSD, which leads to higher substance abuse and addiction, higher arrest rates. So there's the environmental impact, there's the human impact, the social impact, and then the animal impact. It just brings together lots of layers of what we're talking about. So Canvas question back in the week 7, around that time that Doug came, I asked you this: why care? And so some of you have asked me already how I approach this challenge in my life. How do I choose? So I eat meat. I occasionally eat chicken and beef. I have collagenous colitis, which means that I can't digest beans or soy or other protein sources. And so my choices are chicken and sometimes beef for all of the amino acids that I need. And so I choose chicken because it seems like the lightest use on the planet. I choose beef sometimes because of the carnitine that as a type O blood type, I need to have that carnitine, that kind of protein. And so I try to get them locally, right? I try to find them, and sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. So trying to choose wisely when I do have the opportunity. I very rarely eat pork because I actually work with some pigs that have become my friends, and I I volunteer and I see how intelligent they are, and that makes it very challenging for me to work with pigs or eat pigs now. So it's a matter of choice. It's a matter of what's accessible and what your bodies need, what my body needs. And how can we accommodate that and stay healthy moving through the world? So our story of our current agriculture system traces its roots back to 1971. The Secretary of Agriculture's name was Earl Butz. He was working with President Nixon and held that position for 5 years. Under his watch, domestic farm policies shifted. So 1971, quite a while ago. That's when farm policies shifted to support large agricultural operations, corn and soy, and then to shun smaller farms and to not give as much support to those local farms that are producing local, obviously, crops. So that legacy has continued today, over 50 years later, and is evidenced now by the US farms' dwindling crop diversity and massive environmental footprint. The degraded soil, the excessive water use, heavy use of pesticides and herbicides that farming leaves behind. So tying back into some of the things that Alexis talked about in her project last week. She was talking about specifically raising corn for ethanol, but the idea that that corn is raised industrially for other reasons as well, whether it's for food for people or food for animals that we will then eat. So there are other ways, right? There are some industry ways to be aware and choose another story. So there's the local food movement. I have a friend who is a locavore, specializing his diet in things that are found locally, that he can get from farmers, that he can choose to find at farmers markets, that he can get at stores that are selling local. So there's some ups and downs to that, right? There's the idea of these food networks of what's close by to us. There's the opportunity of organic, right? What is organic? The idea that the technologies that are used to raise organic food involve more things like fertilizers of organic origin, such as the manure from other animals, green manure, which is composted material, bone meal, and then also they're doing things like crop rotation and mixed cropping. And so there's ways of actually improving ecosystems while growing food, giving nutrients back to the earth. Farmers markets. How many of you have been to a farmer's market? Okay. Is there anybody who would like to speak to about your experience at the farmer's market? Either how you felt there, what you bought there, how much it cost there, anything that you would like to say about farmers markets?
So downtown they'll have a lot of farmers markets, and one of the vendors there I actually work for, Patchwork Farm. They're like a floral market, and we have a tent set up in like the April to June time. But I love going to farmers markets. I love the ones locally. Me and my mom like to go whenever they have them. There's like the Bollesburg one, there's the one downtown, and then there's the one near Home Depot, I think, in their parking lot. And I always enjoy going there because I feel like I always find something new. So many of the vendors there have such interesting products and products that you can actually tell are cared for and loved. And I like when I bring home something local because I know I'm supporting the people nearby, and the prices are never that bad, at least in my experience. It's always stuff that's affordable. And I like being able to see, especially produce that I can tell has been grown locally instead of in a grocery store where everything is the exact same size, and it just you can tell it's been grown in a way that probably isn't the best. But I love, finding a tomato that has a couple bumps and lumps, and I'm like, wow, like there has been nothing bad done to this, and it's definitely something that I want to put into my body.
Thank you, Jeff. Anyone else want to share a farmer's market experience?
I think food in general is a great form of connection and bonding with other people. So I like when I go to the farmers market downtown and the vendors can explain to you the process it took to make the food and also like how many years they've been making it for and with what family members. So it just like there's the emotional connection aspect and then the food also tastes very fresh and organic. So I always love when I see that the farmers market is open or whatever.
Sweet. Thank you. So in fact, there have been sociology studies that have happened at farmers markets, and the idea that counting conversations that happen there compared to those connections, those kind of conversations that happen at grocery stores. And it's really interesting that the number is significantly higher of people having conversation at the farmers markets. Whether it's engaging with the farmer about their products, or it's with other people that are there at the market. So those connections, so some direct benefit connections of being at the market, that direct connection between the producer and the consumer, it's supporting local economy, less oil input, and then the choice and awareness by those farmers to live lighter and produce their food lighter on the land. There are places that do community-supported agriculture. There are places here in the State College area that do this, as well as across the country. So you volunteer at the farm to do projects, whatever they have going on. You work for 3 or 4 hours a week, and then you, at the end of the week, you take home your food share, your box of whatever the farm produced. And so this is a great way that you can put in a little bit of time in exchange for some high quality food. If you have questions or are curious about this, if you're going to be around in the summer, I can connect you to some farms that do this. And then what is happening on campus? So you know that we have the compost bins all over campus. So those nutrients of the leftovers getting recycled back to the earth. So food waste only goes in those bins. Penn State really wants you to, this is their statement, reduce what you use and reuse what is left. So reducing the methane emissions, that food waste in landfills that's producing the methane we talked about earlier, as well as the idea that this nutrient-rich compost gets spread on all of the gardens around campus. Or if you're local, you can buy that compost and put it on your gardens at home as one of the best or the best kind of fertilizer, putting the nutrients from that food and other organic places back into the earth. There's also Student Farm. If you're curious about the Student Farm, they are very active, lots of fun things going on. This is the email address of the Student Farm director. This can be a huge opportunity for you because actually getting your hands in the soil is known to make you happier. The microbes that are in the soil are good for your body. They produce serotonin. So when you have your hands in the dirt, we often think about, at least in my mind, gardeners are just happier people. And that's because they're spending time outside in their gardens, but also because they're getting this mutual benefit from the dirt that they're working in. So they come into contact with this bacterium, having the topical content with it, inhaling it, getting it into their bloodstreams, and then they have higher levels of serotonin, the happiness hormone. And then something that we can all think about doing, we all eat, and it would be sad waste of opportunity to eat badly. So some of the TAs, we actually, when we get together every Tuesday, we always eat together, and we have that chance of community, of building community around those times that we eat. Results of research from Oxford show that the more often people eat with others, the more likely they are to feel happy and satisfied with their lives. So this social networking, going back to the World Happiness Report, of when we are together, we are happier. So there are also all kinds of organizations that you can be part of growing organic food around the country, around the world. So what can we do starting today? Reducing food waste. start thinking about where food comes from and making choices accordingly, moderating our lust for meat, even if going without meat once a week can make a difference. Adopting something more like a traditional Mediterranean diet, vegetables, fruits, seeds, legumes, all kinds of the things that are good and healthy for our bodies. I recognize that as college students, you have limited choices. So something that's exciting about this series of classes that we're working on right now is that there are some things that you can do right now. Composting is easy, making choices about the food you put in your bodies. Those are things you can do now and as you move forward in the future. Don't you find it odd that people will put more work into choosing their mechanic or house contractor than they will into choosing the person who grows their food? Everything, all of the things you're studying tie back to the opportunity of food. Psychology, sociology, genetics, economics, family studies, marketing, criminology, material science, all these things possibly relate to food and food sources. So your discussion question this week is about awareness, thinking about your favorite food, beverage, or article of clothing. What is it? Why is it your favorite? Speculate about the processes that your favorite went through before it got to you. Thanks very much. I hope you have a beautiful day. I think so. Even just touching base. Yeah. I hadn't thought about it. Quite honestly, I'm just in the routine. Yeah. Why would we not? But yeah. Yeah, I'd love